the agenda. Action will not be taken at the meeting on any issue not on the agenda, except by placement on the agenda by a unanimous vote of all members present. Mr. Hani Shafi is one. Hani, please. No, he's not. General comment.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Yesterday at Public Works, we had an item in the agenda for South Valley Drive annexation and Johnson Ranch subdivision. The presentation that was on the Public Works is basically states that the road is currently 23-foot wide road without curb and gutter. We're proposing a subdivision there. It's classified as a collector, and the staff recommended that we have an exception applied for improvements to the road, which we did, and it was denied, which, you know, the staff, you know, sometimes deny those, sometimes approve them. We actually requested a warp, you know, in that, where we could either waiver the right to protest any future assessment. We intend to place sidewalk along the road. The drainage around the road was not a concern of the residents up there, but they are concerned with the quality of the pavement, which in this area is better pavement than most. I have, I'm not going to do the same presentation as yesterday. I just want to supplement it with a couple of slides. Sorry. I don't know if you see this or not, but the existing section is basically 23-foot wide asphalt section with road ditches on both sides. The request is basically by the staff, or the requirement that is added on this by the staff is basically to widen the road to 36 feet. Unfortunately, the city standards, you know, as stated in the city design criteria, only require 32 feet. So what we're going to do is basically, since the exception most likely is not going to be approved, and our neighbors are voicing concern about the width of the road and the quality of the pavement, we would do the addition of 10 foot, which is 33 feet, and the curb and gutter on our side, and add a sidewalk. Adding a curb and gutter to the other side will create drainage problems for our neighbors, and we do not intend to do that. The cost estimate for doing that is approximately $90,000, with all the unknowns or what have you. We'll round it up to $100,000. We intend to pay for everything but half of the pavement and half of the gravel, which it end up being our share about $74,000. Yesterday, we actually stated that we will pay up to $100,000. We're willing to widen the road now, or wait until, or give the city the funds of $100,000 to widen the road whenever the city chooses to do, or sign the warp. Thank you.
You're welcome. You will be there. Now, the council meeting, I understand, is Tuesday night because of the federal holiday, President's Week, Monday, correct? So you are going to be in attendance on Tuesday night. You'll have an opportunity to discuss in detail your concerns with the full council.
I have a hospital board meeting that I'm supposed to present at. I'm trying to get somebody else to present in my behalf there, and if I do that, then I will attend the city council. Thank you.
That's not possible. You may ask the council to delay for 2 weeks if you.
The only reason for the not asking for the delay is there is a nonprofit involved in one of the lots, and which, you know, we will submit a revised stipulation for you folks. We're going to discuss it with the staff, in which the plat could go through. The exception can be delayed until we figure out a solution with the city staff and the city officials. Okay. And if the plat is not approved, the nonprofit may risk losing a grant of about $2 million. That's the essence of the timing on that.
You understand you can contact council members if they have a chance. They can talk with you between now and then, so thank you.
I welcome any input or any requests or any discussions with any of the city council members or any of our neighbors or any of the city staff. Thank you.
Thank you. Excuse me, that is the only general public comment issue that I have before us. Our next items are the consent items, items 1 through 13. I have a request from Vaughn Vargas to discuss item 3, and also the chief would like to comment on item 3. Go ahead, sir.
Good afternoon. My name is Vaughn Vargas. I am the Community Advisory Coordinator for the Rapid City Police Department. The Rapid City Community Advisory Committee is an eclectic group of professionals, community leaders, and community members with the spirit to enhance the working relationship between law enforcement and the community at large. Our collective experience includes, but is not limited to, criminal justice, homeless service agencies, counselors, victims advocates, academia, and law enforcement. And I'm here to present my support for the grant for body-worn cameras. The CACA has had and will continue to have thorough discussions on policies pertaining to body-worn cameras, and we recognize and appreciate the benefits of body-worn cameras for evidentiary purposes. One specific topic we had discussed was body-worn cameras and the impact it will have on domestic violence and the victims. We have high numbers of victims, domestic violence occurrences, but very low prosecution numbers, and body cameras could change that because we have a hard time cooperating with victims, and they don't want to come present during testimony time. So this will significantly impact that. We also recognize the ability to use body-worn cameras for accountability purposes. CAC members are required to participate on ride-alongs, where we learn of policing strategies, community challenges, and in-field officer community engagement. Although CAC members hear of officer complaints, we have yet to observe officer misconduct during our ride-along experience. In stark contrast, we observe officers going above and beyond their civic duties. The Hawthorne effect states subjects change their behavior because they are under observation. The chief of police is confident his officers continuously exemplify public service and leadership. He is willing to validate that level of service by employing body-worn cameras for the sake of the community and the police department. So we as the CAC stand by that confidence and fully support Chief Jegaris and his decision to implement body-worn cameras within the Rapid City Police Department. The advent of body cameras will forever change how crime is reported. So we have asked that we are on the Committee for Implementation and Policy and Regulation. So please consider my letter of support on behalf of the Community Advisory Committee. Thank you.
Thank you. So noted. Chief, you had a comment?
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to clarify that in addition to the memo that I wrote, I want to just clarify the timeline regarding this. The application deadline for this grant is February 16th, which is tomorrow. And our intention is to submit the grant application, and then if the council for some reason was not supportive next week, what we would do is we would be able to retract that grant application. And I just want to clarify that this is quite different, this grant, than the typical Department of Justice grant that you've seen, our COPS grant, in that this does not require us to receive council approval prior to submitting for the grant. However, it is a good practice to make sure that we do have your approval, especially for something like this that is going to have an ongoing expense for the city's future. So if you're able to approve this at council next Tuesday, which I would encourage, there still will be a couple of opportunities to reconsider this. The first one will be during the priority-based budgeting process for 2018, as this will be presented as a program offer, the city's new expense. And then the second opportunity will be once we've done our research and development prior to engaging in a contract for services with a technology provider, we would require your approval at that point too. So I just wanted you to know that this is preliminary approval at this time, and that there is a lot of research and development work to be done, but it is important to us to know at this point if we have the council support to move forward, because we will have to invest a significant amount of staff time to continue moving forward.
Thank you, Chief. Rather than go through pulling it after consent, does anyone in the council have concerns or questions that they want to ask to the chief at this time on this item?
No, point of order.
Okay, then we'll do it. Thank you. That concludes comments on related to the consent item. Is there a motion from council on the items for consent to pull or to approve the agenda?
I make
Okay.
So are we making a motion or are we pulling items?
She's made a motion to approve the consent calendar with the exception of pulling number 3. Is that correct?
So we can't pull any more then? Are we considering this motion? Usually we
Okay,
pull
we'll
items.
just back up. Would you pull number 3, please?
Just pull
Yes. Okay. Are there other items on the consent calendar? Steve?
Item number 9, please, Chair.
Is that it? Amanda?
And item number 13, please. Okay,
Are there any other items?
now Lisa can make a motion.
Now, do I have a motion to approve the consent calendar less items 3, 9, and 13?
So moved.
I have a motion to approve and second items on the consent calendar less items 3 and 9 and 13. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Passes. Item number 3. Item 3 is to authorize staff to apply for and accept if awarded the 2017 Department of Justice Body-Worn Camera Implementation Grant Program. I'll go to Lisa Modrick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to make that a motion to authorize staff to apply for and accept the award, if so, given it the 2017 Department of Justice Body-Worn Camera Implementation Grant. And if I can have a second, I'd like to continue discussion. Thank you. I have felt as a citizen for many years that as our city's grown, it was time for body cameras, and I'm really impressed that there's an opportunity for a grant that could come into our community and provide that. And as Mr. Vargas had said when Vaughn was talking about CAC, this protects everyone. It protects the officer as well as the community. And so it's a great device to have, and other communities are doing it, and they're doing it quite successfully. So I see this as a successful program, and it would be worth having this program begin with grant and move forward as part of our police department tools that they would have from now into the future. So I'm hoping that the grant will be successful and awarded. And that's all I have for now.
Thank you, Chair. Chief, do you, if I may, Chair, if I could ask the police chief a question? Thank you. Chief, do we have any opportunities for benchmarking with communities that you know already of in the state?
I can tell you that there are several other communities in our area that already have moved forward with a body-worn camera project, including Sturgis, Spearfish, Belfouche, Aberdeen, the Oglala Sioux tribe. So this is an area that I would say that we're just slightly behind the curve, and we need to consider moving forward to maintain a progressive nature with this technology.
All right, thank you, and I appreciate it.
We have a motion to approve. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. Thank you. Item number 9, which acknowledges the December 2016 sales tax report. Mr. Laurenti, please.
Thank you, Chair. And I wanted to, if I can, ask the finance officer a question on this one. My main concern here is that it appears that we have a $340,000 deficit in what we were projecting from budget year to budget year. So I wanted to ask the finance officer if she could clarify that, because I believe there's some other mitigating information that the public needs to know about on our sales tax. So
If I might, Mr. Chair. Thank you. So the percent that we budget, when we budgeted for 2016, the only final numbers we had were 2014 sales tax revenue numbers. So we build in a 2% increase over that actual number for 2015, and then we build in another 2% increase for the 2016 numbers. And so while the percent is 2%, and if you looked at the 15 actuals, would be about that number, when you look at the actual dollars, it ends up being about $178,000 that we were short in revenue, sales tax revenue projections. Now, if you look at the overall projections in general fund revenue, and just glancing at what we had receipted in through the end of the year, we actually exceeded in total what our general fund revenues were projected to be at. In addition, I know we had various vacancies throughout the year that helps offset that revenue deficit, but the most glaring one, I guess, and the one that probably has the biggest impact is the fact that we had basically 2 director positions that were being filled in the interim, as we currently do now, and those salaries probably on their own would have offset that sales tax difference of $178,000.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. May I follow up a question with the finance officer, please? Thanks.
Certainly.
So Pauline, what you're saying is if we had department directors filled that position, and I'm just trying to get this correct in my mind, that we would have been short that 170, or we would have netted zero?
If we would have had department directors in those positions the whole year and not just paying for the interim directors, or director for both of them, sorry, we probably would have had a little more expense than what the revenue was that we lost. So it wouldn't have netted to zero either. We would have been short the $178,000 plus whatever in addition to. But like I said, other general fund revenues also made up the difference. So it's more complicated than just comparing the two.
Because that would have included like the property tax and the fees for the services, anything that in the general fund that was budgeted for, those came in higher and kind of offset our sales tax projection.
In total, yes.
All right, thank you. And then Pauline, I know that we've already passed the 2017 budget, but as we get ready for the 2018 budget, I know in the news there's been a lot of concern at the state level that the sales tax, because they're on a July to June year and we're on a fiscal year or a calendar year, not a fiscal year. Is there any concern that the trend is going to maintain at less than projected expectations of 4%?
You know, we're always concerned when it's less than what we average, because if you look at our 5 or even a 10-year average, we average closer to a 5% increase for the 10-year, and honestly, anything less than a 3% in the 5-year period is not normal. So we're always concerned when it's not coming in as we're expected. And even for 2017, we're going to be continuing to monitor the sales tax to see if we need to make any adjustments in our spending for the year, and then we will take that into consideration moving forward as well. We're hoping with Amazon voluntarily collecting sales tax that will help offset it somewhat, but it won't be probably nearly to the extent that we would like to see it happen.
All right. Thank you. And at this time, I'm just going to take, if the chair will allow me to, the prerogative to remind everybody that we did balance the 2017 budget using cash of $3.5 million. Thank you.
Have a motion from Councilwoman Modrick to approve the acknowledge the report, and a second from Councilwoman Scott. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next is item number 13, which is to approve the request from Black Hills Habitat for Humanity for a local governing body support letter for their South Dakota Housing Home Funds application. Do I have a motion? If not, a question from Amanda Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to make that motion to go ahead and approve this request. If I can get a second, I'd like to retain the floor.
Motion made by Amanda Scott, seconded by Stephen Laurenti. Go ahead.
Thank you. We have seen these requests before. It may even have been from the Black Hills Habitat for Humanity. And I understand when some of these nonprofit organizations go out for other funds, part of their application package is they need these letters of support from governmental agencies as well as any other main community sponsors and that type of stuff. I believe the last time I asked this question, and the mayor's not here, so I'll follow up and probably ask this question Tuesday night. But in the past, I have asked that just because the city council is approving the letter, or for the mayor to sign the letter of support, does not obligate the city to finance or allocate any funds at this point. That is not part of this approval process. This is simply just our governmental agency showing that we do support our nonprofits in our community. And I, for one, can't really think of one nonprofit that I really don't support in our community. So I think this is more of just a check the box for a lot of these applications, that they have to have this letter of support for people outside of our area who don't really know our community. So I am in support of showing our support for this. Thank you.
Thank you. As my memory recalls, we approved items 1 through 13, less items 3, 9, and 13. Is that correct? And we also approved 3, 9, and 13 by separate motion.
You have to vote.
Okay, so the motion to approve item 13.
There is a motion.
You made that, and seconded by Steve. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Carries. Excuse me, I'm a little rusty on this. It's been a couple of years. All right. Now we're in the non-consent items, items 14 through 20, and we're going to open comments from the public. And I have a speaker request for item number 14 from Susan Fidel to speak about item 14, which is to do discussion on vision funds at the request of John Roberts, who's not here today. So go ahead, thank you. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak to your committee again. YFS is asking the city to consider offering vision funds for projects again this year and to begin the application process as early as possible. As you know, the city and Youth and Family Services have been strong partners in providing critical and important services for thousands of children and their families in the Rapid City community each year. Of the children we serve, 80 to 85% are living in poverty. 75% come from single parent or foster families. 45% attend our Rapid City center-based programs, and they are of a minority culture. So the families that we serve and their children really need equal opportunity. The families are working hard to get their feet under them and be responsible parents. And they want more than anything for their children to have the opportunities to grow into wholesome, capable, and responsible adults. Over the years, the Rapid City area has partnered with Youth and Family Services to acquire necessary facilities, and then YFS has taken it upon itself to secure the necessary funding to provide essential services. Since 2003, the number of children and families we serve has grown from 8,500 to 14,000. We are completely out of space, and we have children on waiting lists. Our planned facility expansion will enable us to increase services such as infant-toddler care, middle school programs, child trauma services, family case management, partnering with various programs to expand fatherhood services, and also methamphetamine prevention. It will also enable us to provide safer playground facilities for our children. Numerous longitudinal studies have shown that effective prevention and intervention programs for children have strong financial benefits for a community. These programs reduce juvenile delinquency, increase educational success, reduce the number of families on welfare, reduce child and adult substance abuse, increase family self-sufficiency, and reduce crime. Overall, for every dollar invested in prevention, there are at least $18 in savings for future costs of a community. In some situations, these savings are as high as $21. It just makes financial sense to prevent problems rather than to treat them. As we mentioned before, we realized that we asked for too much before in the Vision Funds request. If the city decides to offer another round of Vision Funds, and if Youth and Family Services is awarded funding, we have figured out a way to phase our project and save about $2 million in our initial costs. While we missed last year's round of New Markets tax credits funding, we're still high on the list with at least 4 community development entities who would be interested in funding our program if we did have a commitment from the city. We've already raised about $4 million for our project. If we were to secure another $2 million from the city's Vision Funds, we could acquire 2.5 in New Markets tax credits and likely another $2 million from outside the community in grants and contributions. This would certainly bring about $4.5 to $5 million in new funds into the community, and that would be a benefit. So we are requesting that the city give serious consideration to offering the Vision Funds again this year, and if at all possible, as soon as possible.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have no more speaker request forms for any items on the public comment for non-consent items. Is there a motion to close public comment? It's closed. Thank you. Item number 14 is discussion on Vision Funds requested at John Robertson. Does anyone want to make a motion on that? Lisa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This had been continued from the February 6th City Council meeting, and I know that we had put in movement the request to start looking at the ordinance of Vision Funds and where we're at, and I believe that that's going to be presented to the council at some point, and I'd like to ask Joel, City Attorney, if I could, a question on that.
Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Joel. I know you've been digging in because we had an adjustment that we did last year to make it a one-time. Now we're looking to see if, in fact, the Vision Funds project is something that could be considered earlier than last year, because we really didn't get to opening it until about August or September on the decision. At what point do we look at and review and have before council if we can actually activate Vision Funds again, and sooner than later?
Well, that's really up to you. You have a plan for, I guess, 2017 now. So if you wanted to open a process to look at plans for 2018, that's really up to you and the mayor to decide that you want to do that. The mayor needs to select a committee and then bring the names forward to you for approval. You know, with the process for 2017, one of the key factors was determining how much money you were going to expend. I've attached a memo that kind of lays out some of the process. The only real time limitation in it is once the council's been selected, they solicit proposals, and there needs to be a minimum of 30 days between the solicitation of proposals and the hearing on those proposals. However, if you look at some of the other steps, they obviously take some time to implement. So if you start the process now with the mayor, it will probably take, again, several months for the committee to be selected, the committee to be appointed, the committee to solicit projects, the committee to review the projects that have been submitted, and then bring their recommendations forward to you. But you could theoretically start right now on working on a plan for 2018 funds.
Thank you, Joel. I'm done for now on that, unless something else comes up. Thank you.
Councilwoman Scott, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to make the motion to continue this item to the first Legal and Finance meeting in March. And if I can get a second, I'll explain why. Thank you. Two
I have
reasons.
a motion by Scott and a second by Laurenti. Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you. Two reasons. One is Alderman Roberts is the one that really brought this forward. And obviously, based on what our city attorney has said, is that the city council needs to kind of research or have some discussion as far as what kind of plan or the funds that we think are available. And that's going to take some coordination with the mayor as well. We do have scheduled a city council working session, retreat working session, where no decisions and no votes or anything else are going to be made, but we're going to talk about, and I think this would be an excellent topic to have at that working session so that we can kind of, as a group, talk about what the city council is looking at for those funds, and then what maybe we can put together some type of plan of working with the mayor to see what kind of funds are available. So the reason I bring that up is to let everybody know we are having a working session. It'll be notified or noticed in the paper, but it will be next Thursday on the 23rd, and really we're just going to be talking about general infrastructure topics, vision fund. You know, I think this would be an excellent one. I know our council president has been asking us what kind of topics we want to talk about at that working session, and I think this would be an excellent one. So with that being said, in that meeting next week, I'd like to continue this because we may be able to have a better public discussion after we have that working session, so we kind of get an idea of what the city council wants to do for the next couple of years. So, thank you, Chair.
I see no further requests to discuss. I have a motion before us to continue this to the next Legal and Finance Committee, which I believe is March 1st? Or when is it? To the next Legal and Finance Committee, anyway.
First legal and
First in March, okay, thank you. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 15 is an approved resolution number 2016-106, a request by the City of Rapid City to consider an application for a resolution of annexation for property generally described as being located east of Elkvale Road, north of Twilight Drive, west of Reservoir Road, and south of Homestead Street. Do I have a motion?
Mr. Chair, if I may point out, there are some options that come with the final decision by the council related to payment to the rural fire district. So whether that's included in your recommendation to council today or just decided at the full council meeting on Tuesday, staff does need direction on that payment to the fire district to be specifically indicated in the motion.
No problem with rescinding the existing motion if both the petitioner and second are in favor. They are, so it's rescinded. So, Amanda, go ahead.
Thank you. Sarah, Mr. Chair, may I ask Sarah a couple follow-up questions?
Yes, you may.
Thank you. Sarah, you specified there's some options. Would you go ahead and please, for the record, tell us what those options are for the public?
Sure, and I might need some backup if you have those the way they're specifically written on the agenda item. Do you have those with you? I believe option 1 is to include payment to the Rapid Valley Fire District, and option 2 is to approve the annexation but to deny payment to the Rapid Valley Fire District. And then the third option would be to not approve the annexation itself. There would also be the option to approve the annexation and indicate some other amount between 0 and the estimated payment. That's also an option.
Sarah, I did pull it up, and I can go over those options as well once you get done with the questions that I have.
Okay.
So based on this, and I know we have we handled this before because we had an annexation a couple years ago, and it also was in a fire district. Mm-hmm. And so could you please explain why this is so important to a fire district in the county?
Sure. So the fire districts in the county apply for grants, and they take out loans to acquire equipment and other aspects of their operations that they need to function. The way that they repay those loans is by establishing debt districts or fire districts, and those are managed by the county auditor. They levy property taxes on owners in those areas. So I just want to point out that the people who live in that area currently are already paying into a rural fire district, and they are already being assessed based on their property taxes for this. So when the city goes to annex property, we are removing property from their district, so then that levy is no longer assessed and they only pay for the municipal services that they're now receiving. So if the city removes property from their district and does not compensate for the fire district debt that they have on record, we're essentially removing some of their tax base and therefore some of their ability to repay those debts that they are on the hook for.
Thank you, Sarah. And the, just another point that I'd like to make is for my peers up here, because I would support a motion as the Planning Commission did, and I'm reading it right off the summary. The Planning Commission did recommend approval of this resolution with the intent to annex with option 1 to go ahead and direct staff to include the payment to the Rapid Valley Rural Fire Protection District, and I would support that if any of my peers want to make that motion.
If I may just add one more clarification, there is the option for the auditor to continue to levy that fire district debt if the city doesn't pay this portion of it. Those are all of the options on the table.
Sarah, but when that goes out, the burden of removing those properties into the city where then they're paying municipal property tax, the burden of those property no longer paying that gets redistributed amongst the rest of the people within that fire district in the county, correct?
The auditor, the Rapid Valley Fire District, sorry, I'm going to use my hands and make kind of visual here. That district is the same minus Big Sky, which would be gone. However, the auditor would create another district levy specific just to Big Sky to make up for their portion of what that debt is.
Oh, so what you're saying is the residents of Big Sky being annexed into the city would be basically double taxed, because then they would continue to pay their fire tax district from being in the county, plus pay for their property tax, which already includes general fund of our fire and police protection.
That's correct.
Okay. I would still support the recommendation from the Planning Commission. Thank you, Sarah. That was very good. Thanks.
Mr. Laurenti.
That was my intent with the motion, but I'll make it again. My motion is to approve the annexation with option 1 as part of that.
Do I have a second? That was my second. Motion made by Mr. Laurenti, seconded by Ms. Modrick. Any further discussion? Finance. Pauline.
I just want one more clarification. I know it was in the resolution and the information that Sarah provided, but just to highlight it, this is not something that we typically budget for every year, so we don't know if we're going to annex property or not, and if we do, if it's in a fire district, and if the fire district has followed the procedures to request reimbursement. So this money, the payment, if approved, would have to come from undesignated cash in the general fund at this point.
Yes, see no other speaker requests. Oh, excuse me. Mr. Laurenti, and go ahead, Steve.
Thank you, Chair. And if I may, I'd like to ask the finance officer a question with that input. Pauline, I apologize because I honestly, before I made the motion, I was like, I really should run this past the finance officer first. So can you explain that? What is the other option? I mean, is there another way that we typically do this? Is this out of the ordinary when we're doing an annexation?
This is not out of the ordinary. What is different about this one is because it's such a large area, the amount towards their, and they have a good-sized debt out there because they just built their new fire station, so the amount is much larger than we have ever done before. So up until this point, we've just either used council contingency to pay for it, or way back in the day, we would run it through community planning when it was like $1,500, and they just absorbed it within their budget. But we're talking, I think, over $100,000 if my memory serves me correct, and so that's not something that any department could probably just absorb, and our council contingency is not that large.
So we've already quantified that amount with this particular annexation.
Yes, we've estimated it based on the value of the district as a whole versus the value of what is being annexed, and use that ratio towards what their outstanding debt is.
Would you recommend any change to this motion? I mean, as far as the payment and?
No, if you guys want to pay it, I just want you to know that's where it's coming from.
Okay, thank you.
Councilwoman Scott, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Alderman Laurenti already asked my questions. Thank you.
I see no further speaker requests, and I have a motion before us. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion carries. Item number 17, approve a resolution amending certain fees to be charged. 16? 16? I'm sorry. Introduction, first reading of ordinance number 6156, an ordinance repeating Chapter 108 of the Rapid City Municipal Code relating to wards and precincts and adopting the new revised Chapter 108 of the Rapid City Municipal Code. Do I have a motion before us? No. Amanda Scott, please.
Yes, I'd like to make the motion to approve this first reading.
Is there a second? Made by Amanda and seconded by Mr. Laurenti.
And thank you. And the only comment I'll make is I was brave enough to make this motion because from looking at the precincts, Ward 4 is not included.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Now we can do item number 17. Approve resolution number 2017011, a resolution amending certain fees to be charged in 2017 for various licenses, permits, and applications.
Motion to approve.
Motion is made by Amanda Scott, seconded by Steve Laurenti. I see no request for discussion. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 18 is to approve a special event permitting process for activities in the city of Rapid City, including those using public parkland and/or open space, been continued from January 17th, City Council meeting, and the February 1st Legal and Finance Committee. Do I have him? Councilwoman Modrick.
Yes, Chair, I'd like to make a motion to approve the item.
Motion to approve is made by Councilman Modrick and seconded by Councilwoman Scott.
If I could retain the floor.
You may.
Thank you. I just want to send out a huge appreciation for the Parks and Recs and the staff who also brought together stakeholders and really hammered out the handbook, which is designed to create a guideline, and that guideline can be worked from the events side of it, and that's the beautiful part about putting this into the Parks and Recs department, so that they're able to manage all of these instead of having to have multiple departments manage it to the end. So it was a great design. They've hammered out the handbook. It's been accepted well, and I just want to compliment the staff and Mr. Bigler for that work.
I see no further requests for speakers, and we have a motion before us to approve. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 19 is the second reading and recommendation of ordinance number 6153, an ordinance to amend provisions concerning permitting for parades and special events by amending Chapter 12.20 of the Rapid City Municipal Code. Again, this item was continued from February 1st of 2017. Legal and Finance. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve is made by Amanda Scott, seconded by Steve Laurenti. I see no request to speak. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. I'm getting the swing of this now. Item number 20 is the introduction and first reading of ordinance number 6157, an ordinance adopting the appearance of fairness doctrine for quasi-judicial proceedings by adding section 2.04.13 to the Rapid City Municipal Code. I have a speaker request from Councilwoman Modrick, and you may have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This one we've been reviewing now for a while, and I appreciate the Attorney's Office and Joel doing the work that he's done to compare this to what is in our already state codified laws as to what our doctrines are. And in that comparison, we had asked him to bring forward to us, how this new ordinance would be, and if it's more aligned with state code, and then the question would be, why do we need an ordinance on top of state code? So if I could ask Mr. Landine to perhaps catch us up now with where we're at today on this ordinance,
Memo this morning, forgot a moment.
if that would be okay, Mr. Chair.
I'm sorry.
I'd like to ask.
Go ahead, sure,
Mr.
thank you.
Okay. If you could catch us up on where we're at since last week.
Well, I did attach a memo that tried to outline where it was consistent with the state law and identify where, the ordinance would perhaps differ a little bit. I would say generally it does follow state law. I think a rationale for approving it would be that state law, the statutes are kind of spread out a little bit, and this would kind of organize all of the rules related to due process in one place. Would be a little easier for the council to maybe see or understand, find it in the city ordinance versus the state code. However, I also understand that when you already have state laws in place, sometimes it's a valid question to ask, should we just adopt ordinances that essentially mimic state law? And that is certainly a valid consideration. And then, if state law changes, then we have to look at amending the ordinance and things like that too. There were a few areas where it did differ a little bit, one of which being if someone was aware of a ex parte communication that had occurred and the decision maker in question had not disclosed that communication, then it came out that there had been these communications, then they could be automatically disqualified. Really doesn't set it up that way in state law. However, what state law makes clear is if there's actual bias or an unacceptable risk of actual bias, that a decision maker should be disqualified anyway. So it's just a question of whether or not there's bias. The other difference is that it allows the decision makers to decide if somebody has actual bias or an unacceptable risk of bias and can prohibit them from participating in the discussion on that issue. State law sets a standard of clear and convincing evidence, but when I read state law, it didn't really make clear who makes that determination. And frankly, it looked like to me they were telling the courts what the standard would be when somebody sued the governmental entity. So the way I wrote it was trying to prevent us from getting sued in the first place, which is that body, if the question arises, has the authority to prohibit the decision maker who has the bias or the unacceptable risk of actual bias from participating and hopefully avoiding lawsuit. But otherwise, I would say if you look through it, the ordinance, for the most part, really follows state law.
Councilwoman Scott, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to make the recommendation that we send this to council with a recommendation to deny this. And if I can get a second, I'd like to retain the floor.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. You may go ahead.
Thank you. And I'm going to keep my motion unless Joel convinces me otherwise, but may I ask Joel a follow-up question to what he
Certainly
just said?
you may.
Thank
Certainly.
you. So Joel, I was really interested in the very last thing you said, and that was that if this, when you say governing body, I'm going to say city council. If the city council is considering something and the city council decides that someone on the city council it has an has a biased and can't be fair and objective or whatever, that they could, don't we already have that ability to vote and remove someone on the city council from a conversation if we think that they are already biased or can't be?
I'm trying to remember. My comparison. I'm not sure. There is in conflict, and that's where this gets confusing too. And I understand this is a complicated issue, and it's having talked to a number of you about due process and things, and having dealt with this for a number of years with not only the council but other boards. It's an area where everyone struggles. It's an area that is a struggle for other communities. This isn't just an issue facing Rapid City. The conflict ordinance we just adopted, yes, I believe there's a provision in there, but this isn't quite the same as a conflict of interest. Conflict of interest presumes you kind of have a relationship or a financial interest in the outcome that prevents you from being fair. This really more covers that you're not impartial or you're not capable of being fair based on reasons other than a direct financial or relationship interest. So it's similar. It looks at whether you're biased or prejudiced. So if you're talking about the recently adopted conflict, I think the conflict may cover something that would be considered a bias or prejudice, but it may not cover everything, whereas this would basically cover those things that are outside direct financial or relationship interest.
Thank you, Joel. You've given me something to think about. I would still support the motion that I made for today, but between now and Tuesday night, I may change my mind because of that last piece. But I really do think that having 10 council members, if there's one biased or prejudiced, I think that would be outweighed. So I'm really going to have to give it some thought. But at this point, I believe we are covered in state law. I feel comfortable that we can follow state law. So I'll stand by my motion to deny.
Thank you. We have
Thank
a
you.
motion before us to deny this item in a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And for the record, to show the chairman votes aye to deny also, so it's unanimous for the record. We have now, our next item is to adjourn. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Any debate? Those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed?
Only ever comes from
Motion
you.
carries. We're adjourned.